Starting, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Campbell. I am the Assistant Director for the National Adult Protective Services Association, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to today's NAPSA Regional Representative Advisory Board's webinar. So thank you all for being here. Before introducing today's topic and speakers, I wanted to provide some information regarding the technology that we're using for today's webinar. All attendees are automatically muted. So if you have any questions, please write those in the questions box that's located in your webinar panel to the right of your screen. Those questions will be monitored and read aloud for the presenters. We are recording the webinar today, and that will be posted on NAPSA's website, and you'll receive an announcement. The slides and an additional handout are uploaded in the handout section of the control panel to the right of your screen. And there are a couple of polls in this presentation, so please be on the lookout for those as we move through. So today we have three presenters with us from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to discuss elder fraud prevention and response networks, building collaboration to fight exploitation and abuse. We have Jennifer Duane, who is a Senior Program Analyst with the Office for Older Americans, Deborah Royster, the Assistant Director with the Office for Older Americans, and Erin Shivey, Content and Outreach Specialist with the Office for Older Americans. So thank you so much to all of our presenters for being here with us today. And without further delay, I will hand it off to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Karen. If you could just confirm that you can hear me, we'll be off and running.
Yep, we can hear you.
Perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time from your very busy schedules to join us. I'm Jennifer Duane. I am a Senior Program Analyst at the Office for Older Americans, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Get the slide to advance. There we go. That's me. And I've been with the Bureau since 2011, late 2011. And I am looking forward to talking to you today about elder fraud prevention and response networks. But first, I'm delighted to introduce our new Assistant Director, Deborah Royster, who would like to say a few words. Deborah?
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'd just like to echo Jennifer's comments. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Deborah Royster. I am Assistant Director of the Office for Older Americans at the Bureau. I am now finishing up week 4 at the Bureau and joining the Office for Older Americans and the great team of professionals who do this work. The mission of the Office for Older Americans is to develop initiatives, tools, and resources that help to protect older adult consumers from financial harm and that help older adult consumers to make better and sound financial decisions as they age. Just a little bit about my background. Prior to joining the Bureau, I served as Chief Executive Officer for a regional nonprofit that provided comprehensive social services to older adults, and prior to that as General Counsel to the District of Columbia Office on Aging. And in that role, I had a lot of exposure, a lot of opportunity to engage with my colleagues in adult protective services and to really gain tremendous respect for the really hard work, the hard jobs that you have and the great work that you do every day. It was really in that role when that is really where I gained a real appreciation for the types of financial harm that older adults experience every day. And that's really where I became familiar with the work of the Bureau and the Office for Older Americans in this space. So I'd like to just take this opportunity to salute you for the work that you do. And I hope that you will enjoy this webinar that really highlights a critical initiative of the Bureau to help connect community stakeholders who are involved with serving older adults to prevent and respond to financial fraud and abuse that occurs to older adults. So thank you so much again for joining us. And Jennifer, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Okay. Sorry, I hit the mute button again. Let's start with talking about networks. What is a network? Just a little bit of background. In 2016, the Office for Older Americans, the Bureau, conducted a study of different types of networks around the country. We basically boiled it down to 23 of them that included MDTs, coalitions, task forces, a couple of alliances, and we actually identified triads, which are run by sheriff's departments, as a type of a network as well. So we studied them to find out what their makeup was, how they ticked, what were the sort of best or promising practices of different types of networks, and also how they sustain themselves, etc. So we released a study in 2016 with a report and recommendations. We decided to use the term network because it's really sort of a catch-all for all the different types of networks that are out there, which I didn't mention FAST, and there's also, of course, elder death review teams and other types of networks. I've even heard elder justice leagues have been popping up a bit here and there. So when we say network, we're talking about sustained, voluntary, collaborative efforts or partnerships working to prevent, detect, or respond to elder abuse is what they're usually doing, but they also, in our case, being a financial regulator, we are mostly focused on elder financial exploitation. But I will, be very clear that we know that it is a form of elder abuse and that they often run hand in hand. So we're very cognizant of that. I believe we have a quick polling question.
Yes, so I will launch that.
Karen. So we're going to ask you if any of you are currently engaged with a network of any kind, a voluntary, sustained partnership, alliance, etc.
So I have launched, I've launched it. So in order to select an option, you can just click the little circle next to the option. And I'll leave it open for about another 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And then I will share the results. Jennifer, can you see that on your screen?
I can't, but I will pop forward. Oh, nope. I actually can't see the results, but you could just read it out. That's
okay. Sounds great. So 64% answered yes, and 36% answered no.
Aha, okay, that's really interesting. Thank you for participating in that, and we will have another polling question. So back to the study, the recommendations of the study were that elder abuse networks that are currently working on elder abuse specifically, that do not focus on financial exploitation, should develop activities and the capacity to respond to financial exploitation. And also, obviously, as a financial regulator of depository institutions and other financial services, we believe that networks should seek to engage financial institutions and also community-based organizations such as faith organizations and others that serve these communities. So in other words, expanding the base to include more than just the responders or just the investigators. But I also know that many networks have these members and have a difficult time sometimes getting the responders involved. So it's not exclusive recommendation. It can work any which way. One size does not fit all when it comes to networks, that's for sure. We also suggest that networks be developed in areas where older Americans of diverse linguistic, ethnic, and racial backgrounds can be better served by engaging stakeholders that serve these populations. And then, of course, delivering educational and case review services that are relevant and appropriate to these populations wherever possible. So we have another polling question here. Karen, would you like to set that up?
Absolutely. All right, so I am launching that now. So for those of you engaged with the network, do financial institutions participate in your network? And this is a select all that applies. So if the answer is yes, there are 3 options that could apply: bank, credit union, or other financial service, or you could select no. And I'll leave this open for about another 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results. So the results are the answer yes, a bank is 39%. Yes, for credit union is 23%. Yes, for other financial service is 26%. And no is 54%.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that. That's really good for us to know. So on to the next slide. So in keeping with our own recommendations of expanding networks into areas where there are large numbers of older adults and small numbers of networks, or to those of you who are not currently engaged in a network but would like to be, in 2017, we launched a pilot convening program to help expand the presence of networks across the country. And we also identified that there are many networks that have been out doing great work, but perhaps have had a change in leadership, which can be extremely difficult in terms of sustainability, or who have kind of lost their way for some other reason. Perhaps funding dried up, perhaps there's stagnancy in the network, or there was a desire to expand the network but couldn't get the membership engaged or keep them engaged. There's just a lot of challenges. It's not easy work to collaborate, come together, plan, prioritize, and make things happen. So we got going with a program to help expand the number of networks and to also study the promising practices of building and increasing capacity of networks along the way. So we developed a model for identifying potential networks themselves and coordinating with key stakeholders, facilitating meetings and garnering support to help initiate and enhance local networks. And so we produced a report in 2019 called Convening Communities to Build Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks. And it talks about, much like the study, although a little bit more of a drill down, common activities of networks, replicating and expanding them, convening the stakeholders, getting folks, the right people to the table, working on, it actually talks about the outcomes of the convenings that we held in 5 states. We ultimately held these convening retreats, we now call them, in 9 states, but we were able to document outcomes after about 5 states, and then we made some further recommendations based on our experience. And the difference between the study in 2016 and the convening report is that the study looked nationally at networks in general and did some sort of higher level data gathering. But the convening report was where we literally hit the ground and worked with either existing networks or with communities that had no collaboration between, say, adult protective services, law enforcement, legal services, financial services, and perhaps other stakeholders, definitely amongst other stakeholders. So that's what the convening report contains. And we'll give you information a little later on where you can find all of this. Or as a matter of fact, I sent a list of publications in that hopefully can be downloaded, I believe, at the end of the program or can be forwarded to you. And I'll also give you ways to follow up with us directly. So following this report and the pilot program of convening stakeholders, we learned that network coordinators or folks that want to have networks in their communities would greatly benefit from having a turnkey tool to help establish a network, whether that is an MDT, a financial abuse specialist team, also known as FAST, Coalition Task Force, Elder Justice League Alliance, whatever you wish to name yourself. This is a turnkey tool to help you to think out how to pull people together and either build a new network or enhance your existing network. It's web-based. It's on our website, and it's 23 pages that look somewhat like this. They're not very dense. They're very easy to get through, but they have links that will take you to other places where you can find resources. We actually have specific tools, 10 specific tools that range from a sample timeline to plan an event, a facilitator guide for when you actually have your event, how to get through your meeting, sample agendas, sample invitations, sample invitation lists, all kinds of tools that help, that we actually use. We developed it like an event in a box kind of a model where you can take that and literally put it to work. All of these downloadables are also, they can be changed. You can adjust them or amend them to fit your needs, so you don't have to use them exactly. It's not a proscriptive program. It's actually something that you can take and build to suit. And so, for example, well, a retreat, I'm just going to give you kind of a snapshot of what a convening retreat looks like. It's generally about a 3.5 hour morning, 3.5 to 4 hour morning event, starting with, of course, the arrival of folks, networking, coffee, the usual, and then a coming together, perhaps a local leader kicking it off with some sort of encouraging words and comments up front. There might be a quick overview of what elder abuse or elder fraud looks like in the community, made by a leader such as someone from APS or law enforcement, or even two together. We've seen that. There's a little discussion of what is a network, what are we trying to do here today. You may already have an existing network, so you would adjust your comments accordingly. There's a we've done I would say very dynamic rounds of introductions where everybody introduces themselves very briefly, but enough to be able to say who they are, who they work for, and what that agency or organization's connection to elder abuse and financial exploitation is. And we have found that a lot of times, even though these organizations and agencies have been in the community for a long time, they have never come together under the heading of preventing and responding to elder financial exploitation. And oftentimes people just don't know who else is out there, or who is the contact person at that agency for this issue. So the introductions are extremely important. Then the agenda often shows a break where everybody can get up and network, and you see a lot of, our experience is seeing a lot of business cards getting passed around. And then everybody comes back together for about an hour and a half of very focused work group sessions. And hopefully you have everybody at the table that you want for starters. It does not have to be your entire desired list for this, but it could be that you get a few financial institutions or somebody from your state financial regulator's office, or perhaps somebody from the State Bankers Association or Credit Union League, and you've got perhaps somebody from, hopefully from, definitely from APS, law enforcement, legal services, perhaps there's some senior services and other, you know, obvious stakeholders, but hopefully you can attract some other stakeholders. And actually, I didn't even mention that there is a stakeholder spotlight tool in the development guide that helps you to identify who different potential stakeholders could be. In some areas, depending upon whether you're rural or whether you're in an urban or suburban area, you may have access to other resources such as federal law enforcement, the United States Postal Inspectors, the FBI. Depending where you are, you may be able to get some of them to come to your meeting. And of course, there's always the elder justice coordinators who are fairly new to the elder justice, having a role in elder justice just in the last couple of years, and they're in the U.S. Attorney's offices. And they, of course, usually are in the urban areas, but may not, if you're in a rural area or too far away for them to get to. We actually, in Oregon, I can say we had our elder justice coordinator do a brief recording that we played at the network retreat, where they introduced themselves and spoke a little bit about their role and pledged to make themselves available to the network in the future for training and for activities, etc. So it's a very comprehensive guide that gives you all kinds of tools to use at your discretion, and we hope, is very easy to navigate. And of course, we would appreciate your feedback if you have any thoughts. So as I was just saying, we discovered that in our work that the stakeholders would benefit from detailed instruction. We found that many were already working full-time jobs and could use the ready-made resources to plan, produce, and host a retreat, or a convening retreat, or a training retreat. Again, you can call that whatever you wish. And that folks need resources and guidance to establish and maintain the network afterwards. That is actually the most important point, because having a meeting, pulling people together, sharing your passion, sharing your resources, you know, expressing a desire to stop elder financial abuse and financial exploitation of all types is not necessarily that hard to do. What's really hard to do is to keep it going. And so there are resources and guidance on how to do that within the development guide. So here are the features. They come in 4 particular areas, as I mentioned: how to plan the retreat, how to host the retreat very specifically, how to reconvene and establish your network, or reconvene and enhance your existing network. That could mean that you establish working groups that are focused on prevention, or are focused on ledge advocacy, or are focused on victim witness assistance. And there's a number of areas that we also provide a list of how you can break your network up, identify people's strengths, or let them identify their own strengths and what areas they want to work, and then team them up as a working group and let them get busy. Because that is actually one of the #1 complaints about the networks out there, is that it's just hard to go to meetings. It's hard enough to go to meetings and find time to go to meetings, but if they're not feeling super productive, or they don't have work to do, or they don't have outcomes, people tend to fall off, and it loses its vigor. And so the expanding of network capabilities, you know, after you've established your priorities, the leveraging of the working groups to reach goals, engage the community, and grow the influence of your network. So as you create and grow your network, you can use these tools to identify and prioritize goals. Build foundational knowledge is huge. Cross-training is one of the biggest needs and one of the best ways to keep your network engaged. And I'll give you an example. If you have a network that has financial service folks working with you, or depository institutions, do you or will you ask them to do a training on their policies and practices, on their privacy issues, on the types of filings they make with the federal government, et cetera. Financial institutions and each of the partners can train each other at every meeting. You can host a training. So just a few tips in there while we're at it. I mentioned the planning templates in here, the stakeholder spotlights, the timeline tools, sample invitations and reminders, sample agendas, and then the retreat facilitator guide is really a robust tool because it helps the facilitator to actually plan and execute the meeting activities. And when I say meeting activities, when I mentioned those working groups that happen after the sort of opening and level setting, tone setting activities of the morning, of the early part of the morning, when you get into the groups, there are several exercises that you can have the individual groups do. So basically, we suggest that you break your large group up into small groups, diversify groups that include, you don't want all the bankers sitting at one table and all the law enforcement at another table and all APS, you get my drift. You want to have each of your stakeholders broken up and sitting together in a diverse group so they can each hear each other, they get to know each other, they create very sort of neutral spaces to raise their voice and discuss their issues. And perhaps some of these stakeholders have never been to any sort of elder justice meeting, but they're seeing a lot of it in their work, say a financial institution or otherwise. And they have a perspective and they have an idea of what they think needs to be done or what could be done. And they also will learn from you what already is being done and where the gaps are. And so that is how that sort of breakout session works. And ultimately, with the tool that we have for taking notes on the breakout segments, it helps to focus the stakeholder participants on determining priorities and actual action steps. We also include sort of event planning tools like a supply list and, of course, handouts for participants, which we have links for, and then voting sheets, because the facilitation of the group exercises includes voting. And there's individual voting, and there's group voting, and then there's priority voting. And so the voting sheets are basically to tally the voting. And in the end, and I think we will get to this in a moment, you can actually pull those results, document those results, and then we have a sample readout so that you can get them all lined up and share back with your group, which helps you to plan going forward. Karen, I should probably stop for a second and ask if there are any questions at this point.
We do not have any questions so far, but this is a great time to add a reminder. If folks do have questions, you can feel free to write those in the questions box that's located in the control panel that should have popped up to the right of your screen when you entered the webinar. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So speaking of questions, we do have a resource for the Q&A discussion session, and that we recommend that you hold 15, 20 minutes at the end. I mean, it seems always to never be enough time, but you do want to break for lunch at some point. And so having a sort of a wrap up where folks can just ask questions, because they will have been hearing readouts from each of the groups. Each of those groups is going to have a note taker and a spokesperson and so they will condense their ideas and thoughts, and then everybody will go around the room, and you can just see the light bulbs going off in people's heads and the thoughts and the commiseration and the whispering between people of, oh, that's a good idea. And it's actually very, very interesting to see how much energy is generated in these types of meetings. And so at the end, if you just kind of make a free-for-all before you break for lunch of, so does anybody have any questions or discussions or want to share something that new that you learned or something you think is particularly important about the day or anything that wasn't discussed that should be, and just open it up. And it's really interesting what comes out. And I also like to really encourage that somebody in other than the facilitator, who's very busy running and facilitating the meeting, if a couple of people are designated, and usually better to have more than one, to actually take down quotes of what people say. And those quotes do not have to be attributed to a name or an individual, as not to, put them on the spot in any way. But obviously very sort of positive quotes. But we've heard things like I remember, I'm trying to remember where we were. We were in Vermont, and there was a gentleman who was the head of the Police Chiefs Association, and also obviously police chief. And he just stood up in the Q&A session and said, I want everybody's phone number. I want everybody's name in this room. I need to have you on my speed dial. And of course, he didn't know that at the end there is a readout, and within that readout is a roster of everybody that was invited and everybody that attended. And so basically the network is just already built by virtue of having this meeting. But his quote was placed in there of, I need everybody's phone number so that I know who to call when I, whatever his quote said. I'm paraphrasing poorly. And then we had another one where an opening speaker who was a U.S. attorney declared a call to arms. And that was quite the quote, which of course she approved following the meeting. In that case, we always get quotes approved when we quote officials, especially if they want to put their name to it, which is can be quite helpful. But the quotes can be all over the place. But people sometimes say, that collaboration is key. I had no idea there were so many great resources, whatever it is. So I recommend that you take those down because they can be quite powerful and affirming of the value of the session. And these sessions also build engagement and help participants to, form or enhance their relationship with each other by answering each other's questions, hearing each other speak, and also you can kind of wrap up and grab anything that was not mentioned that should have been mentioned. And so, areas for opportunities for innovation. Sometimes the ideas fall under 6 or 7 headings that we all know about, which are listed in the guide. But oftentimes there are tidbits of wisdom or local knowledge or ideas that are just very specific and didn't come out. They're afterthoughts sometimes. So making sure that you give folks the opportunity to share the wild idea they have about holding something like a hair raising, for example, where they want to do a training, they'd like to head up a training program for hairdressers and beauty parlors or whatever. It's not like that idea has never been thought of before, but it's something that somebody may say, I think we should do this, and I'd be willing to help. And so you give people an opportunity to speak up. All right, and more tools. I mentioned the sample retreat readout. You see it in blue on your screen because it's a link to an actual readout. And it's basically a white labeled PowerPoint, meaning it's an unbranded PowerPoint. But within that PowerPoint, we have created sort of a fill in the blank so that you can create a sample readout. And then there's a list of working groups and how to establish them. There's some goal setting activities, and then how to develop a referral guide for your network. So I'll show you what's in the sample readout. You start off with the retreat goal. And we actually provide a sample of a goal. And basically it's, how can elder justice advocates of anywhere USA come together to build and enhance collaboration to prevent and respond to elder financial exploitation. A little bit of a long version, but I think you get the idea. So you have your goals stated up front, and then you have your participating organizations, and we provide a spreadsheet inside the PowerPoint for that. Thoughts from guest speakers, that's where your quotes, which you can actually sprinkle throughout. They don't need to be all on one page. You can be creative with this with this readout template. The different group activities that were undertaken and results, the priorities as determined by the group and by the voting outcomes. Again, more quotes from retreat participants can be sprinkled throughout. Possible next steps that you identified or actual next steps, if that's the case. Of course, any opportunities for innovation, and if you didn't have any, you don't have to include them. And who can help, and the retreat attendance list. So the difference between the participating organizations on up there, page 2, which is listed as page X, and the difference between the retreat attendance list is that the participating organizations is just that. It's only a list of the names of organizations up front. But it can be quite impressive when you see how many have shown up, and when you reconvene after your retreat, you don't just reconvene necessarily with only the people who showed up, who participated. You probably want to put the word out to everybody you initially invited, whether they made it or not, and you may identify some more people along the way, or others will identify people that they think should join up or help or come to the next meeting. And so when they see the sample readout and they see all who was in attendance and they see the attendance list of names at the end and phone numbers or emails or however you choose to list it, they say, wow, look at that. That's really a great group of people that came together, and look at the resource we have with this attendance list and all these people that I can meet and I can call if I need help. So that's the point of the readout. I won't show it to you here, but when you go to the tool, to the development guide, you will be able to pull it up off of the website and see what it looks like. And if any of you want samples from another retreat that took place, I'd be happy to share with you from another group that has approved theirs going out, as an example. So the tools, again, for expanding network capabilities is the activities for working group, and that contains planning future meetings, educational outreach, case reviews, ideas for cross-training, sort of a list of different training topics, a program evaluation guide, funding considerations, and an actual evaluation for the retreat itself. Then we have the tools for hosting the retreat. There's some optional activities in there. There's resources for professional cross-training that will help strengthen your network and benefit the members, and obviously, hopefully, ultimately, the community and older adults and family caregivers themselves, or financial caregivers also. The cross-training can also help members and the community better understand each other and how to work together to help victims. And I like to add survivors. But in addition, I think the cross-training just builds relationships, it builds communication, it builds understanding, and especially when there tends to be a lot of misunderstanding. That I've been doing this work for close to 20 years, and there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially where there are limitations to how certain agencies can work. Like as APS, you folks have very specific rules around HIPAA and very specific, sometimes state-specific guidelines on how you can respond and when you can or when you can't. Some states require capacity evaluation. The person has to lack capacity in order to receive services, and in other states, it's not quite as restrictive. And so, and this can cause frustration for other partners, like financial institutions don't understand why they're mandated reporters, but it doesn't appear to them that the person has been served. And in fact, you may have gone out, but you can't talk about it with them. You can't follow up. And so there's all this opportunity through the cross-training and building relationships to dissipate all that sort of misunderstanding and perhaps sort of consternation that takes place. I mean, it goes on between APS and law enforcement and APS, financial institutions and law enforcement. You know, there's always seems to be a little bit of a rub between agencies for one reason or another. And so networks help to tamp that down to a minimum, if not eliminate it, and help everybody to understand each other and what each other can do and can't do and how to fill in the gaps. And so in places where APS is really restricted due to lack of funding, lack of training, lack of support from legislation to respond, or whatever the case is, having others to work with who can do some of the legwork for you, or can fill in gaps, or can to do a lot of prevention work, helps to build that safety net and the infrastructure you all need. So we invite you to connect with us if you would like to build a network. First of all, the guide down below, you can find it at consumerfinance.gov/elder networks, consumerfinance.gov/elder networks. That'll take you straight to it. If you are interested in talking with us further about actually conducting a retreat, please let us know. We are looking for opportunities, and actually, as times have changed due to the pandemic, it's actually harder to get people together. It's actually almost impossible in some cases to get people together to have face-to-face meetings. And probably some of you have been thinking, this is all fine and dandy, but how do we get people together? And it's a great question. And some of the networks that we've been hearing about and talking to out there are actually telling us that they're having a better experience of pulling people together. Here we are 6 months into the pandemic. The first 3 months were impossible. Everybody was in emergency mode. Now things are kind of settling down a little bit, it seems, where PPE is in place, protocols are in place, things have, maybe not for all of you have things calmed down at all, and they certainly haven't calmed down all the way. But we are hearing that networks are now using technology, since technology has become the only way for us to do our work. I mean, I am working from home, Deborah's working from home, we're all working from home. And so why not meet from home with your network? And so our challenge at the Bureau in the office is to figure out a way to translate all of these tools into the remote meeting environment. And we are well underway with identifying some ways to do that. And we also have a couple of networks who have agreed to help us pilot remote meetings and remote network convenings or retreats. So it's absolutely doable, and it just requires a bit of adjustment and creativity, which has been the name of the game for the last 6 months. Adaptation would be another good word. And so, but because it's not the do-it-yourself thing that we thought it was when we built it and released it this year, we thought, well, we'll put out the word that if any of you would like assistance or like technical assistance from us, and that basically means that we would support you potentially if we don't have a lot of bandwidth, we can't help everyone, but if we can, we would be open to taking on some support for some networks out there. We've got a couple lined up now, and we're looking for a couple more for next year. So let us know if you're interested. And by all means, email us at eldernetworks@cfpb.gov. If you have interest, or if you have if you have questions, or you need other resources, or you want to know more about the Office for Older Americans or more about the CFPB, perhaps you have a client out there, or your crew of responders has clients that maybe you're having issues with financial products and services, and the CFPB, being a regulatory agency, may be able to assist that client with getting an answer to an unauthorized transaction, or a problem with a bank or a credit union or some other financial service. So we do have a complaint function at the CFPB, and actually Erin's going to come on, I believe, in a moment and talk about some of our resources. But do feel free to email us if you have questions or need resources or are looking for statistics around SAR reporting or would like information from us. We're more than happy to help or find you help amongst our federal partners or others that we may know of. So with that, Erin, are you with us here?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. I am turning it over to you. Well, hold on a second. Unless there's any questions, Karen, before we go on?
Yeah, thank you. There is a question that came in. It is,
okay.
Is there a directory or compilation of existing networks across the country?
Oh, that question, yes. There are a couple. One of them is with the Department of Justice. And if you want to send me an email, you could go on to their, to the Elder Justice Initiative website, Department of Justice, Elder Justice Initiative. And by the way, that's the United States, U.S. Department of Justice, Elder Justice Initiative. And yes, they have compiled a list of networks, which are mostly, I think, MDTs for the most part. And they are the ones that are run by government agencies. So it does not include those that are run via nonprofit organizations and others, but that is one list. I am not sure if the National Center for Elder Abuse has a list up. They might have some time ago, but they are very difficult to keep up. I can say that because they run, networks tend to run very autonomously. And they're, truly they're sort of coming and going, or they're moving the coordinator will be a law enforcement coordinator, or be an APS coordinator, or be a legal services person, and they can move around a bit. So they're a little difficult. We have a list of networks that we have worked with, and we have a list of the networks that we identified in the study, and there were about 900 of them at that time. The ones we studied were 23 of them. And unfortunately, we're not really able to share that list because it's impossible to keep it up and for us to ensure its accuracy. So I think that the Elder Justice Initiative is the most recent current list. And I know that there are others that have been working to compile lists. The California Elder Justice Coalition also has been working on a list. So if you send us an email, and we can try to see who's out there who may have lists and try to connect the dots for you. Any other questions?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Erin, take it away.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer, you'll have to move my slides for me since you have control over the presentation. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And then the next one after that. Okay, I'm just going to share a couple of resources with you. I know we don't have a ton of time. One of the keystone programs for the Office for Older Americans is the Money Smart for Older Adults program. We collaborated with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, on this program, and it is an elder financial exploitation, elder fraud prevention, instructor-led curriculum. And when I've used this in the past with groups of older adults, I typically give them the resource guide, which you can order from us in bulk for free. I tell them to use this as their encyclopedia of scams. So if they hear about a scam, if they have questions about who to contact, when they learn about scams, or if they are targeted for a scam themselves, there are a ton of resources in that resource guide to help them prevent, but also report these types of scams and get some help too. It's available in English and Spanish. And again, it's an instructor-led curriculum. So if you have volunteers, you could even share this with financial institutions or with legal services attorneys in your area and ask them to lead this training, or you could lead it yourself as well. Next slide. just shows you where you can find that. We share this responsibility with the FDIC, so you can go to their site for the instructor guide and presentation slides, and you can order the resource guide from us at consumerfinance.gov/moneysmart. Next slide, Jennifer. The Managing Someone Else's Money guides are another one of our products that we are incredibly proud of. These are 4 specific guides for fiduciaries or financial caregivers, agents under a power of attorney, guardians and conservators, trustees, and then government fiduciaries like a representative payee for Social Security or a Department of Veterans Affairs representative, a VA representative. And these include just really the how-tos of becoming a lay fiduciary. You'll find out what your duties are, and you will find out how you can make sure you don't have any conflicts of interest, how you keep things accurate in terms of record keeping, as well as how you may be able to protect your principal from financial fraud and scams. So these are great for APS to have in literature racks in your offices, or even to order in bulk and send out among your community members so that others can reach out and get a hold of these documents. They're helpful resources. Next slide. The CFPB Office for Older Americans a couple years ago sat down with Meals on Wheels America and kind of came up with a brilliant idea to put fraud prevention lessons exactly where older adults are. And many older adults are at congregate meal facilities. Of course, this was pre-COVID, and so we have adapted our program a little bit in light of the pandemic. But originally, we designed these placemats with really simple, plain language fraud prevention lessons. They can be used by meal delivery programs, congregate meal sites, community or faith-based organizations, FIs, other groups in so many different ways. We were actually surprised when we analyzed our orders and found out that a lot of people ordered these for free in bulk who we weren't sure how they were using it. So we asked them and found out that people were really using these placemats as large handouts. So we created handouts. They are easy for you to print on your printer if you're making a visit to maybe to a client's home, or if you can print a few out and put them again in literature racks in your offices, or give them to caseworkers as you go out and about the community. They are, again, available for free in English and Spanish. They are on a variety of different topics, including romance scams and imposter scams, Social Security benefit scams, and the list goes on and on. And these are a really great complement to everything you do. In fact, at your Elder Financial Prevention and Response Network convening, you can actually put these placemats out on the tables and share those lessons that way, and get more people involved in sharing these. And let's go to the next slide. The Office for Older Americans offers a lot of resources on our website. We call them consumer advisories. They're pretty basic, 1 page, maybe at most 4-page documents that give you and your clients or anyone else you serve some really help when you need it information. So we have a quiz for you to help prepare your spouse to manage family finances. That might be important for just those of you on the webinar to do personally. We also have information on asset recovery scams, pension advance, pension lump sum scams that can happen, dealing with medical debt. So there is quite a bit on our website, and the next slide will tell you how to get there. We can go to the, perfect. Ask CFPB is a great resource. We have about 1,000 questions that were asked by real consumers. We answered them and put them up on our website. You can search for just about anything if you have questions about any financial product and service. If you or your clients have complaints, you can, of course, submit them through our online complaint portal or through the phone number that you see on the screen. One thing I'll mention about that is that if you are helping a client submit a complaint, you can do that online, and there is a box to check saying that you are helping someone to submit this. And so I think that's particularly helpful for aging service providers to know, so that you can feel confident saying you can help someone submit a complaint to us. Next slide, please. You can email us at eldernetworks@cfpb.gov, as Jennifer mentioned. You can also find our resources, and I'm going to actually give you a better link than this one, consumerfinance.gov/older-Americans. So if you head to that page, you will find all of the resources that I have briefly touched upon here, as well as many others to help you prevent fraud, to help you help older adults in your community live their best lives and avoid some of these financial pitfalls that we see all too often. With that, I'll kick it over to Jennifer to close us out.
Great. Erin, before we go, and I do think we do have a few more minutes, I think, Karen, don't we? Or are we at time? Okay. Erin, you've been, the amazing curator of COVID-19 resources that I had meant to put a slide up here about, and I realized that I didn't. And I'm wondering if you, off the top of your head, are able to speak to or share a little bit about the resources that we've created for concerning older adults and COVID-19.
Absolutely, and thank you for that reminder. If you go to consumerfinance.gov, right there on the homepage, you'll notice the now familiar graphic of the coronavirus itself. It's that kind of globe with some spiky dots on it. If you click that, or if you go to consumerfinance.gov/coronavirus, you will find a myriad of resources for all different walks of life, all different types of financial issues that folks are facing during this time. There are pages specifically for older adults and those who serve them or care for them. There are pages on scams and fraud that have popped up in light of the coronavirus. So that is a truly wonderful resource. We even, and you'll see me in there, a couple of us recorded videos from our homes, which was an interesting project. Learned a lot from that, but there are some really great talking head videos that are just a couple of minutes long that are helpful to share with older adults, particularly one on scams, and also on how to find out a little bit more about mortgage forbearance, if that's an issue for anyone who you serve or for you yourself. A lot of people are experiencing issues with that right now. So there are quite a few different things. We also have a unified housing hub. We came together with a couple of other government agencies, FHA, and HUD, to come up with this unified resource where you can find information on renter protections during the pandemic, mortgage forbearance, as I mentioned, information for those who may have issues with those products and services. So definitely check out our coronavirus resources. We worked really, really hard in the first couple of months of the pandemic to figure out what consumers would need and how we could help them get there. And of course, as the situation continues to evolve, we will continue to put out resources on the things that we hear consumers need help with. To that end, there's also a report that could be helpful and interesting to you, where we've summed up some of the most common complaints and issues that consumers reported to us in the first several months of the pandemic. So you'll find that on our website as well, and that could be just interesting for you to know about, just as a member of a network team, or just as an interested party serving older adults. Thanks, Jennifer.
Great, thank you. One of the tools or resources that is contained within one of the blogs that Erin led for our website, is a list of questions for financial, what we call them, Erin, partners, spouses, people who are engaged financially with each other around planning for disaster. And we've often thought of disasters as being, natural disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, etc. But now we have a whole new type of a disaster on our hands in real life that has done more, financial damage and created greater challenges than I think any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. So there's a couple of those kinds of tools on there that are really, easy, consumer friendly tools for, generally for disasters, but certainly with an eye to what we're currently experiencing. So I mentioned that as well. Are there any other questions so far on there, Karen, for us?
No, we don't have any other questions right now.
Okay. Well, and I don't know if Deborah is still with us. I don't know if you have anything to add. She may have had to go, and that's just fine. Of course. So I guess we could say we are finished. I will thank you all so much for, first of all, for all the great work you do. And as Deborah mentioned, very, very hard work out there, and particularly these days, just really super, super challenging. So we greatly appreciate you and all you do to help keep older people safe and independent at home for as long as possible. And please do let us know if there's anything we can do to assist or support you. I should probably mention, you might be interested, if you're not already aware, of our report on suspicious activity reports that are filed by banks or by financial institutions, or financial services, I should say. They're filed with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network of the United States Treasury. And this is a study that was put out in early 2019, and it analyzed 170,000 suspicious activity reports on elder financial exploitation that were filed by financial services, mostly either money service businesses like the money transfer businesses, such as Western Union or MoneyGram. There's quite a few of them out there, but those are the two biggies you would recognize. And then by depository institutions, such as banks and credit unions. So if you're interested in reading what financial institutions, some findings from what financial institutions are reporting to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, please, you can go to our website and find that, or you can email us and we'll send you a link. But I also just do want to put out the proviso that, and you can stay tuned for training on this, that the suspicious activity reports themselves are only available to law enforcement. Unfortunately, they cannot be shared with anyone other than a law enforcement agency or responder. But the data that we have mined out of them with the collaboration of the Department of Treasury might be of very, very great interest to you. So I will leave you with that. And thank you again for your time and for all the great work. And we look forward to future opportunities to collaborate with you.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today, to our attendees as well as to our presenters. We really appreciate you sharing your time, your expertise, and also the work that you do. And we got a couple people writing in also saying thank you. So thanks again, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much, Karen.